I want to introduce our first speaker, Bob Carey. Bob is the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Nature Conservancy. In that role, in the Nature Conservancy in Washington, in that role, he's focused on building strong relations with key agencies, developing effective partnerships, and managing strategic initiatives. He leads the Puget Sound Floodplains by Design Partnership, which is an innovative multi-agency initiative focused on increasing the productivity and resilience of the region's farms, communities, and river systems. Previous to that, he developed and managed the Conservancy's basin-scale conservation work for the, forgive me if I mispronounce these basin names, I'm not from around here, but the Skagit and Stillaguamish river basins, to do that justice. He recently returned from Colombia, where he served as a global fellow, helping the Conservancy's Magdalena River project develop a stronger strategic vision and business plan. Bob has an MA in Political Science and Environmental Studies from Western Washington University and a BA from Economics from Rutgers University, so he's got a little Northeastern experience. He's spent over 20 years' experience in the fields of conservation and natural resource management. Bob?
Welcome to the Sunshine State. I think it was the Northwest Floodplain Management Association arranged for a week of very fine weather, so enjoy it, and when you go home, I'd ask that you let everybody know it rained the whole time. So, like catching fish, floodplain management can be messy. So I really appreciate that the conference organizers had me here today. It's a privilege to speak to you all, and here's why. You are the people with the most influence over one of the most productive ecosystems on the planet, the ecosystem that provides a basic element of life, water, but also causes the most destruction, flooding. Floodplains provide fresh water, fish, recreation, productive soils, and many other things that humans benefit from. But as you know, flooding is also the costliest natural disaster on the planet. So because of that incredible productivity and the incredible risks associated with floodplains, as floodplain managers, you all are in an extraordinary position to affect people's lives now and in the future. That's a big deal. So here's the bad news. If your experience is anything like mine, you probably haven't quite lived up to that potential. I spent 12 years of my life in river management in Northwest Washington, and while I was leading efforts to spend millions of dollars protecting floodplain habitats, millions more were being spent to subsidize development and reconstruction in other portions of the same floodplains. While the Conservancy and its partners were spending millions of public dollars setting levees back, millions more were being spent upstream or downstream, reinforcing levees in the same place. So if that experience was a course titled Wise Use of Public Floodplain Management Dollars, I probably would have flunked. And unfortunately, the history of floodplain management hasn't fared too much better. We've done a tremendous amount of really good things. But at the end of the day, flooding continues to increase, and the health of many of our river ecosystems continues to decrease. And one of the things that's contributed to this is the stovepipe manner in which we as a society have tried to manage our floodplains. Managing with a singular focus on flood control, as much of our historical experience has taught us, has led to the incredible wealth, us losing some of the incredible wealth of our floodplains, while putting people in places at pretty significant risks. And so at the end of the day, that revenue stream that's generated from the natural capital we have in naturally functioning floodplains is decreasing, while the costs are increasing in the form of water treatment plants having to build and maintain and repair levee systems, higher food costs, reduced quality of life, disaster response and reconstruction. So our revenue's going down and our costs are going up. As a community, the floodplain management community has been talking about the need to integrate naturally beneficial functions and multiple human objectives into floodplain management for years, particularly since the Galloway report was issued in 1994. We've been talking about integrated or multiple objective floodplain management, ecosystem-based management, and the like. In my experience is that most floodplain managers are actually trying to do this on the ground, but there's relatively few examples of us doing it well, particularly on a systemic scale. In Puget Sound, I believe, we are actually starting to make integrated floodplain management a reality. Oops. We call it Floodplains by Design. Floodplains by Design is a partnership, and it's focused on managing our river and coastal floodplains in a way that produces more benefits at fewer costs to society. And it's about accomplishing those goals in a way that produces less conflict, generates more political support, more financial support, and provides a greater return on public investment. At the heart of Floodplains by Design is an understanding that an integrated, multiple benefits approach to floodplain management, one that integrates natural and gray or built infrastructure, and integrates multiple societal goals, is a more effective approach. Floodplains by Design is at once a national nature conservancy strategy, but in Puget Sound, it's a partnership, and that's what I'm going to speak to today. But it's not just a TNC endeavor. The Floodplains by Design partnership was initiated by a suite of state and federal agencies, including the State Department of Ecology and Puget Sound Partnership, as well as USGS, NOAA Fisheries, FEMA, and the EPA. It's currently led by TNC and Department of Ecology, which is the state floodplain management lead, and the Puget Sound Partnership, which is the state agency responsible for recovering the Puget Sound ecosystem. But the work is guided really by a broad-based local, state, federal, private, tribal partnership that's really guiding the work we're doing. And at the end of the day, our goal is to really make dramatic reductions in the flood risks that our farms and communities are exposed to, make dramatic improvements in the health of our river ecosystems across the region, and accomplish those goals in the context of other human uses and advance those interests in agricultural viability, recreation, clean water, and the other things we use our floodplains for. And at the end of the day, it's about making stuff happen on the ground. And I'm aware that you don't need some environmentalists up here telling you the right way to do floodplain management, but I think there's really pragmatic reasons for doing work in the way we're doing in Puget Sound. First, integrated projects, multiple benefit projects, are often more viable. They generate more political support and ultimately can secure more funding. And they're also more cost effective because we're accomplishing multiple goals, societal goals with single projects. We're avoiding mitigation costs. We're avoiding long-term maintenance and reconstruction costs. So I'm just going to give a couple quick examples of what some of this work looks like on the ground. In North Puget Sound, the Conservancy implemented 2 levee setback projects in agricultural landscapes. And what's noteworthy about these projects in the Skagit and Stillaguamish River, and Bill, you did a great job pronouncing those, is not that we achieve both salmon recovery and flood risk reduction goals. It's that work happened in an extremely politically contentious environment. Salmon recovery work had been all but completely stalled because of the conflict between fish and agriculture. But what made these projects fly was the fact that the flood and drainage goals were placed on par with the salmon recovery goals. And this is just critical. If it wasn't for the multiple benefit approach of these projects and truly embracing the needs of those different constituencies, these projects would have never happened. But the multiple benefit approach isn't just appropriate in agricultural landscapes, it applies to a whole range of different landscapes. Mark Isaacson will talk really well to this in a few minutes. On the Puyallup River, though, in Pierce County, again, a very different landscape, the county there has been implementing a series of levee setback projects for a number of years. And Hans Hunger, who's both the county floodplain manager but also the chair of the Northwest Regional Floodplain Management Association, has explained this in a couple different ways. From an engineering standpoint, he said, we just can't continue to fight the river. It's not sustainable. We need to give, as the conference theme indicates, more room for the river. But when we brought Hans to speak to the state legislature about floodplain funding needs a couple of weeks ago, he explained it this way, and I really love this. We need to implement floodplain projects that appreciate and value rather than projects that we need to go back and rebuild or reconstruct after the next big flood. The appreciating values to which Hans referred include the scenery, the fish, the cleaner water, the recreation opportunities, open space, the things that will grow and improve with time as we set levees back and give more room for floods and fish. And at the end of the day, this is often a more cost-effective approach. It's important to realize that this is not a new idea. Local floodplain managers, again, as Mark will speak to in a few minutes, are really leading the charge and have been really embracing this concept of integrated or multiple benefit floodplain management. What the Floodplains by Design Partnership is trying to do is support them at the regional level so that they can not only implement the projects they're trying to do, but really scale up their efforts to have bigger impacts. So we're taking a regional systemic approach, trying to create the tools, the incentives, the policies, and the enabling conditions across Puget Sound that enables increased level of integration and ultimately increased scale of action across the region. Integrated floodplain management, I've heard said, is the floodplain management paradigm of the future, and really today in Puget Sound, it's becoming very much the reality. And so here's how we're engaged in this new paradigm, if you will. And the whole body of work that we're involved in is really driven sort of from the bottom up. Over the last few years, we've convened a whole series of discussions, workshops with folks that are on the ground in the local communities doing this work to figure out what their biggest barriers and needs are, and they drive sort of the priorities of this regional partnership. And these are the 4 big needs that have been identified. First of all, we need to move beyond our stovepipe programs and interests and align our different agency programs and policies. Secondly, we need to support the development of more integrated floodplain visions and project plans, both at the local level but also at the regional level. We need more money. As you all know, this is expensive work often when we're dealing with flood infrastructure and the like. And finally, to accomplish those first 3, we need to build our base of political support. It won't happen without leadership. So, 4 main areas in which we are working through the Floodplains by Design Partnership. The first thing we're doing is developing a first ever database across the region that really integrates ecological information with flood hazard information. So we can start conversations about where integrated work is most viable or most important. This is an image, a snapshot from some of the work that USGS is leading in this regard. Much more technical detail will be provided at the Floodplains by Design concurrent session this afternoon, so I'd encourage you to come to that. But at the end of the day, we believe that this assessment can help multiple funding programs and agencies identify the places where multiple program goals can be met, so that through coordination, we can, at the end of the day, get more bang for our buck. Secondly, we've heard from the floodplain management community that developing more integrated visions and plans is really important, but it's messy work. It's complicated, it's often contentious, and it's costly on the front end. So to assist with this, we're doing two things. First of all, we're convening, there's sort of a network of folks across the region that's doing this work so that they can better learn from each other and improve the work they're doing in their local jurisdictions or watersheds. And then secondly, we're creating what we call a decision support tool that allows us to pull together and look at information generally developed through separate isolated planning process into a single platform where we can put these different interests and goals next to each other. This is just an early snapshot of what some of this could look like. And there are some analytical abilities with this tool, but frankly, it's mostly about just putting the information in a place where these different stakeholder and interests can look at it, compare their needs, and develop more integrated plans that we believe will ultimately lead to larger scale action. Third, if we do want our work to scale up and be more effective at the end of the day, understanding that we're operating in a complex and resource-scarce environment, we need more funding and policy incentives that enable this work, that incentivize this work. So we're doing two main things at this point. First of all, we're trying to improve the permit process. I'm sure many of you have experienced the woes of permitting through time. We can't avoid the need to get those permits, but what we're hoping to do is create a dedicated multi-agency permit team that can provide more clarity, more collaboration, more certainty for folks as they're implementing projects and trying to get them onto the ground. And secondly, we're trying to bring more money to bear. And some of this occurs naturally. As you develop multiple benefit projects, you can apply to different additional granting sources, but we're also bringing new funding through the door. NOAA Fisheries was the first one to embrace what we're doing here. Funded a suite of multiple benefit projects across Puget Sound to the tune of $2 or $3 million. And then last year, the state stepped up in a very significant way. The Conservancy and its partners put together a suite of 9 projects totaling $33 million that we took to the state legislature. They not only completely funded those projects in a pretty tight fiscal environment, they included an additional $11 million for an open grant round. At this point in time, all that money is flowing through the State Department of Ecology, and Ecology is in the process of putting together another $50 to $60 million package of projects that we'll take to the governor and legislature later this fall and next year. And if that's not enough, the Conservancy is leading an effort to pull together a broad-based coalition that's actually talking about how we create a new, long-term, very substantial, dedicated funding program that could bring something on the order of $3 billion to integrated water infrastructure projects across the state. This is a big deal, and it's super exciting. To make all that happen, though, there we go. We clearly need to enhance our communications and expand the support we have from elected officials, agency leaderships, and other stakeholders and decision makers. And so we're trying to build some of the communication projects, tell the stories. We have a website now, floodplainsbydesign.org, where you can see some project examples. Ultimately, that's where some of our technical information will reside. But we're also working strategically to build the coalition of supporters. If we want this work to really fly the way we do, at the end of the day, we need support at the local level, we need the support at the state level, and at the federal level. So here's the good news. First is I'm retaking my course in smart floodplain management. I think I'm getting a passing grade now. But second, because of the sort of the sensibility and pragmatic nature of this work, what started as a concept just a couple years ago has really gotten legs, and it's exciting to be part of what started as an idea and is now really becoming more of a regional movement. And so over the last couple years, we've secured $47 million in new funding for floodplain management work. That funding has leveraged an additional $80 million from previously existing funding programs. We have 15 on the ground, multiple benefit projects that are being implemented, new projects that are being implemented right now. So real work happening on the ground now. And there's this significant groundswell of support that's developing around this integrated floodplain management approach. And that is what has enabled these serious, it's a long shot that we might succeed with a statewide bond measure, but the fact that we're even having very, serious conversations at that scale is extremely exciting. It would not be possible without sort of the broad base of support that comes together around this type of project work. So I just leave you with 3 messages before Mark Isaacson comes up and gives you much more example of and what this work looks like on the ground. But integrated floodplain management, in my mind, and I think many others, is just smart management. It's often more viable, more cost-effective, and at the end of the day, we believe can deliver, at least in many places, it's not the solution everywhere perhaps, but in many places it can provide more overall benefits and fewer costs to society. Secondly, it's transferable and scalable. In Puget Sound, we're not only seeing funding and project work gravitating in this direction, but we're seeing it warmly embraced by a broad diversity of floodplain managers and stakeholders. And it's being implemented in a wide variety of landscapes that transcend the urban-rural divide. And finally, I would say this, that whether you work at a local, state, private, federal level, everyone has a role in making this a reality. Success requires the collaboration and leadership at the local level to develop integrated projects, and it requires those of us working at state, regional, federal levels to get out of our stovepipes, work to align our resources and different programs, and develop more integrated floodplain management solutions that, at the end of the day, again, as the conference theme indicates, provide more room for floods and fish, and help us deliver better outcomes. So I was going to show a really cool video, but I'm out of time. So if you want to see a really cool video, you have to come to our 3:45 Floodplains by Design session. There's a little teaser. And you'll, at that session, you'll get much more information, details about the technical work, what the projects look like on the ground, what some of the policy work looks like. So in close, just I want to thank the NORFMA and ASFPM for the opportunity to speak today. I want to thank our funders listed here, without whom this work would not be possible and I wouldn't be here today. So thanks to EPA, Department of Ecology, Puget Sound Partnership, the Boeing Corporation, and Russell Family Foundation. And I want to thank the partners. Again, this really is a partnership. This work wouldn't be happening across the region without the great work that's happening at the local level. Our federal partners, USGS, NOAA, EPA, FEMA, were instrumental in getting this effort off the ground. And the state of Washington has been a real leader in this. They have strongly embraced this approach in Washington. They are putting resources to it, and I believe they've really positioned themselves as a national leader in integrated floodplain management. So thank you all for listening, for the opportunity to speak. Enjoy the sun and the fish of Washington while you're here, and learn lots this week. Thanks.